I mean, can y'all even hear me good? Let me check my shit real quick. Cause you know how it likes fucking up. Alright, good.
Crazier drugs that you've never heard of. A couple weeks ago, I decided to compile a list of the weirdest, most obscure, and most unheard of drugs on the infinitely deep iceberg known as the internet. That video's list was only 5 drugs long, but honestly, 5 drugs doesn't even scratch the surface of this monstrous iceberg. So today, I'm here to bring you the much anticipated part 2. If you haven't watched part 1, don't worry, you can watch it after this video. It's a great video, but it's not a requirement to watch this video. As I did say in the last video, these videos are a product of me venturing down hundreds of rabbit holes on the craziest drug forums and websites I could find. Regardless, the wait is finally over. Let's get right into the list. Number 1. EA3167. No, not EA Sports. It's in the game. EA3167. Close though. What happens when you create some type of mad scientist coalition of some of the best chemical engineers and scientists in the world, paired with billions of dollars in backing from the United States military budget? Well, you get a chemical weapon that's so brutal even Darth Sidious would be impressed. This wartime designer drug, and I'm not even exaggerating, might be the most extreme non-lethal drug I have ever heard of. In all honesty, this atrocity of a chemical is so ungodly and just plain eerie that it's inconceivable to me why this has even been created in the first place. Like, I can't even understand who would bother imagining such an unnecessary extreme compound to begin with. First, let's begin with
the military. Believe it or not, when you look at the history of like the shit that militaries do with their drugs, they're evil as fuck. These guys be making drugs. Like I still remember the story I heard about the military trying to make a drug to turn people gay, and I'm like, how? That's so crazy. How are you so homophobic that you try to weaponize being gay? Like what? So not only are they homophobic, they were also just unnecessarily evil. Like, when you get into the shit that the militaries around the world do, it gets cartoonily evil. It's really hilarious.
With some context. EA3167 is what would be known as a deliriant. If you've ever seen a YouTube video on what it's like to take too much Benadryl, such as seeing shadow people and spiders everywhere, forgetting everyone you know.
The Hat Man. The Hat Man. He's talking about the Hat Man.
And not remembering how to read anymore, having hallucinations that you can't differentiate from real life, and sometimes forgetting language entirely. The effects of these large Benadryl doses happen because it's a deliriant drug. In general, Benadryl is effective at treating allergies, fever, and flu-like symptoms. But as many of you know, in high doses, Benadryl starts to get super unpleasant, to put it mildly. This is because in high doses, Benadryl is what they call an anticholinergic. Or, in non-nerd terms, it makes your memory about 80 times worse than Joe Biden's. Right, but why is Benadryl anticholinergic? Well, because it's old. Benadryl was released for prescription in 1946, which means that Benadryl is turning 78 in 2024. I'm guessing when scientists discovered it, they were too caught up with all of the stuff that it cured to think about the fact that it crossed the blood-brain barrier to begin with. They were probably like, why does that matter? It's not like anybody over the age of 8 is gonna take a bunch of allergy pills to get high off of. Actually, that's exactly what happened. But like I said, old antihistamines such as Benadryl and other designer deliriants like EA3167 happen to cross the blood-brain barrier, which blocks your brain's ability to use acetylcholine, which is really bad. That's because acetylcholine helps regulate things like sleep, wakefulness, memory, and focus. So basically, getting exposed makes you feel like you're literally going insane. And from everybody else's perspective, you just look like an idiot. You'll try to walk into doors that aren't there, talk to invisible people that aren't even around you, run from invisible spiders and shadow people, and most likely try to use your computer, forget your password, and get so pissed off that you punch the imaginary spider on your screen. However, let me be clear, Benadryl is not fun to abuse. Most people that try to use it in high doses recreationally end up being traumatized at some point, and long-term abuse can lead to early dementia. If you don't believe me, watch a couple Benadryl trip reports on YouTube and come to your own conclusion. Now that we have a better understanding, let's talk about EA3167, the drug in question for this list. In the 1960s, the US government had a new goal, and that was to make bioweapons that didn't necessarily kill people, but incapacitated them for days. This program was known as the US Military Chemical Weapons Program. And one interesting result of this program was a contract with Edgewood Arsenal, who eventually developed this psychological war crime of a drug.
I'm not gonna lie. He's evil, but ain't he drippy though? He trippy though. Like, wow, look at how my boy's posing. Look at how he's posing. Like, like, you seen them? They're back there. Like, I'm telling you, each one of these, this man eats. This is why we don't. Jesus.
Drug. EA316
Got a whole
has the
muff
exact same
monster
effects
right
as
there.
3QNB, but it lasts way longer. And unlike 3QNB, which was just accidentally discovered, EA3167 was purposely developed and designed to be terrifying. In both of these drugs, the effect is simple. It incapacitates your brain's ability to use acetylcholine, which, like I said earlier, is essential for memory and not going insane. If somebody wants to get you to do this stuff, they probably will. It's a white, crystalline, odorless powder, completely soluble in most liquids, including water, and has delayed symptoms several hours after contact. It also has a half-life of 3 to 4 weeks in moist air, which means that your enemy could spike your food with it and wait weeks until you eat it. It also lasts a really long time in soil. If you happen to get drugged with this stuff, you're basically going to lose your mind. According to official sources, common symptoms include both, quote, psychological and physiological effects, with the most incapacitating effect being the state of delirium characterized by cognitive.
Like, no, imagine that, though. Imagine someone just, like, you're just fucking chilling, right? Then out of nowhere, you eat a fucking, let me think of something that you can take a spike this in. Nah, you go to drink your iced tea, and then you just start seeing shadow fucking people. Like, you know how pissed I would be? I would fucking be scared as fuck. It's like, you don't even expect it. You're like, you're just chilling, and out of nowhere, you just start fucking, like, going fucking loopy. You know? Imagine it like, oh shit. Imagine a whole town mass this, and like mass just has like mass hysteria too. Like a whole town just start seeing shadow people. Make a whole cult that way, bruh.
Dysfunction, hallucinations, and the inability to perform basic tasks. What's crazy about 3QMB is that the US military designed a specific cluster bomb called the M44 generator cluster, which basically sent a bunch of flying gas canisters down on your enemy, creating a visible white cloud of doom. And if you got caught in it, you would become incapacitated anywhere from a couple hours to a couple of days. But that was just phase 1 of this drug. The final supervillain form of this drug, EA3167, was basically what you would call super Benadryl, because if Benadryl turns you into a vegetable, this stuff turns you into bedrock. Ingesting a tiny amount will give you a bad Benadryl-like trip, but only requires 0.2 milligrams for an average weight person, and it lasts anywhere from 5 to 10 days, with many users saying they needed 20 days to fully recover. So basically, it's akin to a 10 to 20 day long Benadryl overdose. Or in other words, it's actually like going clinically insane for at least 10 days, not remembering how to speak, how to walk, how to read, what the layout of your house was, or anything else really. Considering
If you don't know how bad going clinically insane is, stay up for, like, it's hard. You're probably not gonna be able to do it. But if you can, stay up for 3 days straight. It gets crazy. Like, if you ever want to, like, you know, be like, yeah, I don't want to do drugs. Yeah, just, you know, if you ever start thinking about doing drugs and you want to see what it's like to, like, even get to that level, do stay up for 3 days straight, and I guarantee you, you'll be like, yeah, okay, I never want to. Because that's literally how you feel when, after a certain point on certain drugs, which is why most people, you know, always end up bad, like, after. It's really crazy.
military leaders were planning on drugging enemies with the stuff from a handshake, if you were incapacitated by EA3167, you would probably believe that you had permanently lost your mind. And the worst part is, you would have no idea what was wrong with you. Also, because acetylcholine is the most important neurotransmitter for REM sleep, your brain would get very confused and no longer be able to tell the difference between reality and dream. In fact, this is why your hallucinations are so strong on anticholinergic drugs. They simply put your brain into a REM-like sleep state while you're still awake. So what you see and what's actually real become indistinguishable in the worst ways possible. And because of this, in my opinion, that's what makes this one of the cruelest chemical warfare drugs ever invented. But wait, it gets worse. Because for some cruel reason, the US military thought it was a bright idea to test this drug on human subjects. And sadly, some people simply never recovered from the terror of losing their ever-loving mind for 10 to 20 days. For example, one source states, quote, even 6 months after exposure, a few subjects demonstrated significant increases in the scores of depression, hysteria, schizophrenia, and mania scales. In other words, if you got drugged with this stuff, it's a pretty good chance that you'll never be the same. And even worse is you might permanently lose your mind. Number 2, galantamine. This drug...
But that's what I'm saying. The military is so comically fucking evil. They're just casual, like, yeah. He sent these niggas. We gotta make these niggas crazy. You know, they'll be aight. They'll be aight. Like, what? That's insane.
Drug is deep on the drug iceberg, but not because of how obscure it is. In fact, some people already know about galantamine because it is often used to treat Alzheimer's. But what not everybody knows is what niche internet communities use it for, which I'll be getting into. But first, let's talk about how galantamine works. Remember the chemical weapon we were just talking about? Well, this chemical is actually the exact opposite. Galantamine is what you would call a cholinergic drug, which basically means that it increases acetylcholine in your brain, which in turn improves your memory, wakefulness, and focus. So unlike anticholinergics, it makes you the opposite of a vegetable. So, a fruit? This is really helpful for people with Alzheimer's, but it also has another even crazier use. Like I mentioned earlier, acetylcholine is a super important neurotransmitter for REM sleep. Well, because of the effects these drugs have on your cholinergic system, Benadryl makes you asleep when you're awake. And by asleep, I mean a waking nightmare. But cholinergic drugs like galantamine make you awake when you're asleep. And because of this quality, people on the internet have figured out that if you go to sleep and then set an alarm 4 to 6 hours after you fall asleep to catch yourself in the middle of a REM cycle, take 4 to 8 milligrams of galantamine, and then quickly go back to sleep before the galantamine kicks in, the galantamine will take effect on your brain while you're in the dream, which will give you about a 50% higher chance of lucid dreaming. And if you don't know what lucid dreaming is, it's basically realizing that you're in a dream and pretty much doing whatever you want, like flying, gaining superpowers, or even walking around the corner and hoping that your brain will make your celebrity crush appear. And considering it makes your memory and focus better, most people that have tried this method for lucid dreaming say that the galantamine makes their dreams feel like they're dreaming in 4K. Basically, used during the daytime, galantamine is a mild limitless pill, and used during the nighttime, it's like the red pill from the Matrix. Interestingly, this chemical being used for lucid dreaming has also been studied, and one study called, quote, pre-sleep treatment with galantamine stimulates lucid dreaming, concludes that, quote, the percentage of participants who reported a lucid dream was significantly increased for both.
See, you can just do that shit yourself, though. It takes a little practice, but if you, you can just increase the, how much, your brain produces itself. If you just, like, before it's just one, try to go to sleep, build, like, yourself a decent sleep schedule to, like, when you go to sleep, try not to be on, like, any electronics and, like, stimulate your brain a lot. Like, at least an hour before sleep. So, like, an hour before sleep, cut off all your electronics, read a book or some shit. Like, listen to nice, calming music. And then, like, keep a dream journal. That helps. And then, what's the other one? When you're falling asleep, focus your mind on keeping your brain stimulated, but also falling asleep at the same time.
4 milligrams and 8 milligram doses of galantamine. But this isn't really deep enough for a video titled 5 crazy drugs you've never heard of. So I want to go a level deeper. There are actually people who take specifically designed stacks of nootropics, which are basically just legal supplements that affect your brain's functionality, in order to get the clearest, most vivid, and long-lasting dreams imaginable. I honestly don't know what to call these people, because they're not exactly psychonauts, but at the same time, they're still using drugs to explore the deepest depths of their subconscious. So I guess they're somewhere in between. According to some of these shaman-like dream gurus who I've talked to, apparently one of the wildest activities to do in a lucid dream isn't any of the crazy stuff you would imagine, like fighting your mortal enemy with superpowers, shape-shifting, or flying. Apparently, it's just meditating. Now, I know this sounds crazy, but these people have told me that the most fascinating thing to do in a dream once you realize that you're dreaming is to just stop and observe it. They look at the people passing by, they read a newspaper, and they listen to the random characters in their dreams having in-depth conversation. According to them, the state of awareness that they are in during these lucid dreams is more than the awareness they experience in their waking life.
the crazy thing about it is, right, when you're dreaming and you're lucid dreaming, your brain, everything inside your dream is a part of you. So the conversations that you hear is a part of your psyche, and it can really tell you your state of mind, your state of thinking at the moment. It gets really fucking deep and personal, in all honesty. Like, there's a reason why you're not supposed to look inside a mirror when you're lucid dreaming. It's because you're truly seeing how you see yourself. You're truly seeing like into yourself. So, and sometimes if you're not happy with yourself, you're not gonna like what you see. That's why before doing anything, that like, it's better to like have a decent state of mind.
Colors are bright and vivid, like how they used to look when we were kids. And every other sense, such as smell, touch, and taste, is in HD. Some people theorize that this is because the brain experiences different brain waves or states of consciousness in different phases of sleep. For example, REM sleep is the state in which you dream. So basically, being aware in a dream is different from being aware in real life, because once you become aware in your dream, your mind is already at a super low state of consciousness, which would typically take years of practice to achieve regularly. In fact, many cultures throughout history have practiced this dream enhancement with various substances long before galantamine was ever invented. For example, Tibetan monks have been practicing dream yoga as a meditation technique for hundreds of years. Similarly, African tribes have used something called the African dream route to induce lucid dreams as well. Finally, one user on a popular lucid dreaming forum wrote about what it was like to use galantamine, in which he states, quote, "I set my alarm for 6 hours after I was going to wake up when I went to sleep. When I woke up, I took 4 milligrams of galantamine pills and 2 choline pills, downed some water, and went right back to sleep. After some time of tossing and turning, I decided to fall asleep on my stomach, like I usually do. And just as I was falling asleep, I suddenly felt pressure on my body, like someone put a very heavy blanket over me. I'm pretty sure this was sleep paralysis. Usually at this point, I have a hard time staying awake. But because the galantamine kicked in just in time, I felt vibrant and awake even though my body was now asleep. I stayed in my bed, simply observing this feeling. And then, in an instant, I suddenly realized my body had drifted out of my real-life body. This is probably the coolest sensation I've ever experienced. Suddenly, anything I imagined was perfectly visible, as if I were looking at a 3D TV screen. Then, I imagined my fingers touching a familiar texture, and suddenly I was looking down and my hands were touching the object I had just imagined, and an expansive town constructed itself around me. Somehow, everything I could see, hear, smell, and touch was more vivid than I remembered real life to be. And upon my first attempt of flying, I was flying around this new city. I specifically remember a point where I was close to a cloud, looking down at the city, and I was just staring in disbelief at how realistic and accurate my dream was looking and feeling. I could feel the wind from flying, and everything I touched had an accurate texture. What's more is that any music...
This is why that rich niggas that make movies, like writers and shit, they got the good shit. They got the shit that doesn't kill you and will put you in states like this. Like the good writers and shit. I'm telling you, like they have to. Like the guy that made Inception, he knew it. He was taking hella drugs.
I imagined
That nigga was licking toads.
Synthesized right in my dream. For a moment, I felt like Hans Zimmer orchestrating an entire original composition that sounded even better and more out of this world than anything I've ever heard in my life. What felt like 2 hours from me exploring the city went by, and at a certain time I began to get worried. It felt like my brain had notified me that I should have woken up by now. But I remembered that the galantamine was probably causing a dream lasting longer than it would naturally. Shortly after this, I promptly woke up and I looked at my clock and only 30 minutes had gone by. That was the longest dream I've ever had. Because I wanted to mix things up, this is one of the only drugs on the list that isn't necessarily an instant death and horror drug. It's a bit different. But with that being said, I do not in any way, shape, or form condone using Alzheimer's drugs recreationally. But
yeah, neither do I. Don't take the drugs. Unless you want to turn on your economy. Take the drugs, kid, take the drugs. In all seriousness, yeah, don't take drugs, like, for the most part, if you're gonna do something, stick to fucking the simple shit that's not gonna fucking, kill your fucking mind. But, who am I to tell you what to do? Do what you want.
the science and story behind it is interesting. But if you want to elevate your senses without having to set an alarm for 4 in the morning, today's sponsor, 5CBD, is perfect for you. There are a lot of different ways to use THC.
Yeah, we're skipping that.
3. Flubromazolam. For the sake of simplicity, we'll just call this drug Flubro. This drug falls under a category of drugs known as triazolobenzodiazepines, which is pretty much just a fancy word for research chemical benzos. And at that, it's one of the strongest benzodiazepines in the world. What's crazy is that it has a half-life of 50 to 20 hours, which means that if someone using this drug takes even a tiny bit too much, they're pretty much guaranteed to spend the next day or two blacked out. And I'm not talking about blacked out as in sleepwalking around like a confused Xan fiend not remembering anything you did yesterday. I'm talking about going into a straight up hibernation for 48 hours. And in fact, now that I think about it, a good way to put this drug would be Xanax on steroids. Research chemicals are so strong that most of the time, even the most seasoned research chemical enthusiasts steer far away from this stuff. To give you some perspective on how crazy this drug is, I want to talk about how extreme regular benzos are. One good example of this is a Joe Rogan episode where Jordan Peterson explains how severe his benzo addiction was. He recounts how his doctor prescribed him Xanax in 2019 because he couldn't sleep. He started taking
People that take medicine, like, and get addicted. I understand why, but I'm not gonna lie. Like, it really boggles my mind because that shit really fucks with your head. Like, I really don't think people should be like taking certain shit. You know, like, because like for instance, if you get addicted to some of this shit, it just kills you. It'll just kill you. Like if you just stop taking it.
them without thinking too much about it. Then, in 2022, he attempted to get off of them for the first time, which caused him neurological damage and gave him severe withdrawals. In this episode, Joe Rogan also talks about how a doctor told him that Xanax was one of the hardest drugs to get off of, and how it can turn an everyday person into a severely dependent addict in a matter of weeks. Joe also goes on to tell him about another doctor that told him that there are only 2 drugs that can kill you if you get off of them, those being alcohol and benzodiazepines. It's crazy to think that these drugs can literally kill you if you stop taking them. Regardless, after Dr. Peterson undertook months of unsuccessful treatment in American hospitals in an attempt to slowly wean himself off the drug, he finally had to go to a hospital in Russia and undergo a medically induced coma for 8 days just to deal with the withdrawals of Xanax. When talking about Xanax withdrawal, Peterson says trying to get off of them was the lowest point in his life. So just to put this all into perspective, let me present you with one user I found on a popular Swedish drug forum who talks about how Flubro withdrawal is at least 10 times worse than Xanax. He states that, quote, in just 1 week on these, at 1 tablet a day, I got the strongest withdrawals imaginable. If you thought Xanax was bad, Flubro is at least 10 times worse. So if you think quitting nicotine is hard, imagine a withdrawal that's 10 times worse than one that required an 8-day coma to escape from. Users on this forum also go on to describe the withdrawals in more detail.
Which is
Quote,
why
when you're
certain, if
withdrawing
you're
from
broke,
Flubro, you can just
you
forget
shouldn't be
about
doing
sleep
certain
if you don't have
drugs.
any other strong
You
medicines.
can't
I
afford
had to get more Flubro again
procedure
after
to get
being
yourself out
sleepless
of
for
these
3
drugs.
nights.
But
The
then
worst
again,
part was my body and mind felt exhausted, like I wanted to sleep,
if all
but it
drugs
just
were
felt
legal,
like
we
something
would
was
get
wrong.
more
Like there was
regulation so
something
people don't do
preventing
dumb
me from
shit like
falling
this.
asleep. This user then states, quote, I've been on benzos for 15 years. But 1 week of Flubro is literally costing me my life. This substance is absolutely not to be played with. Then another user commented, quote, I've been on benzos for 10 years. I got such an extreme withdrawal from these that I was borderline psychotic. The withdrawals were so bad that ever since that withdrawal, I decided to stop taking benzos forever, and I am currently tapering off them now. We all know Xanax addiction can make you spend months of your life essentially blacked out, not remembering anything. But because of Flubro's ridiculously long half-life, month-long blackouts on this drug are on a completely different level. To demonstrate what I mean, on a benzo drug forum, one user states, quote, Flubro blacked me out for literally months at a time. As a user, you know all of the consequences that come with benzos. Getting fired, crashing your car, and spending money that you don't have. Now, crank that up exponentially. And you know the withdrawals you get? Those get cranked up too. I tried to withdraw at home, and I endured 2 weeks of wasting away before my mind snapped and I went into a full-blown psychosis and woke up in detox.
Like,
I am not messing around with you when I say that this will ruin your life. And I'm not your mother, so I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I'm just telling you what's going to happen. It's turning yourself into an evil zombie and pain will follow. So yeah, benzos alone are scary enough, but these research benzos are on a different level of terrifying. Number 4, MPTP. In my last video, we talked about 4-CMA, which infamously kills your serotonin neurons. Well, in this video, we're going to talk about another neurotoxic drug that's possibly worse, MPTP. Like many of the chemicals on this list, this is a research chemical, which means that it was developed in a lab and doesn't have enough
I will say, some dealers are fucking evil. Like, some niggas will just lace all your shit with the most addictive shit just to be like, yeah, this will keep him coming back. but it's really just like it's really just gonna kill their fucking clientele. And I'm not gonna lie, if we had more good people become drug dealers, our society would be good because they would only fucking deal in shit that's not gonna kill people. You know, everybody can have fun. You know, like yeah, I stand on that. I stand on that.
Historic testing and research to be considered reliable or safe. What's interesting about MPTP is that it's usually created as an accidental byproduct when trying to synthesize another research chemical known as MPPP. In 1976, a 23-year-old chemistry graduate named Barry Kidston was doing just that. Because MPPP gave similar effects to morphine, Kidston was producing it in a lab for personal consumption. What nobody knew at the time, however, was that when you synthesize MPPP, it comes with the risk of being contaminated by MPTP as a byproduct. Interestingly, MPTP isn't neurotoxic on its own, but it is the chemical precursor to MPP+. Once MPTP enters your blood-brain barrier, your brain turns it into MPP+, which is a potent neurotoxin that is guaranteed to kill your dopamine neurons permanently. So, without knowing any of this, Barry Kidston synthesized his MPPP in a lab, and when he was ready, he injected it into himself. Sources say that within 3 days, Barry had developed Parkinson's. He was treated with another dopamine.
Okay, I'm not gonna lie, that's crazy wild. Like, imagine going to fucking school to be like, to chemistry fucking class, learning you can do fucking shit just to get yourself fucking high. You know, I don't understand it. If you want to get high, just spark up a blunt. I'm not gonna lie. I'll say it. Just spark up a fucking blunt. You know, like, or just go eat a gummy if you don't want to. Like, I'll even say it. Go do shrooms. Like, do something that's not gonna fucking like really fuck you up. Like, if you have to inject it in your ass to fucking do it. Like, what the fuck?
Precursor
That's
known
crazy.
as L-Dopa, but unfortunately he died from a cocaine overdose just a year later. Some people speculate that Kidston might have been taking cocaine to self-medicate his Parkinson's. What's scary is this isn't the only case of this happening. For example, in 1983, quote, 4 people in Santa Clara County, California, United States were diagnosed with Parkinson's after having used MPPP contaminated with MPTP, and as many as 120 more were reported to have been diagnosed with Parkinson's symptoms. All in all, this is a terrible drug, and just like 4-CMA, it was never really intended to be taken, but it still ended up being accidentally consumed anyway. Honestly, I can't decide whether destroying your dopamine-producing neurons or your serotonin-producing neurons is worse, but either way, taking MPPP is a horrible idea considering the risk that it will turn into MPTP, and from that will almost guarantee you get Parkinson's. Not many drugs that I've found have such strong, lifelong effects. I don't think I need to go into much more detail about what makes this chemical absolutely terrifying. No matter what you do, never even...
I don't think drugs should be illegal. This is gonna sound bad. I really don't think drugs should be illegal. Like, think about it this way, right? When shit's illegal, people are gonna get their hands on it anyway. But if it's legal, you're reducing the risk. Don't get me wrong, certain should be regulated. Certain shit, like, for instance, alcohol. Alcohol's a deadly fucking thing. Like, if you're an alcoholic and you stop taking alcohol, you will literally die from the withdrawals. You can literally die from stop drinking alcohol. But most people don't get to that level. Why? Because it's legal and regulated. Like, if you look at prohibition, like, people were dying from alcohol poisoning. But it happens less now because it's legal. I mean, it should, yeah.
even think about touching 4-CMA or MPTP or MPPP or any research chemical or anything at all. Don't even drink water. At this point, I'm basically terrified of everything because these drugs are insane. But we still have
Water
one
can
more,
kill
and
you
it's
too,
the
that's the funny
craziest
part.
I've touched on by far. But quickly, before we get to this last drug, I do have a confession. In the process for researching for this video, I found a lot of other drugs I wanted to discuss that just wouldn't fit in this video. And I know this was only supposed to be a part 2, and it's gonna be a 2-video series, and that's it. But seeming as you guys really enjoy this video, I thought I would leave it up to you. If you want to see a part 3, let me know. leave a like, and if
Hurry
we get
up,
to
hurry up.
50,000
Stop
likes,
yapping.
we'll drop a part 3.
Stop
Admittedly,
yapping.
these videos are risky for YouTube, but you guys do love them, so if I could enter DPT. DPT is a drug that is generally just a bad deal to agree to. If you happen to have a good trip, most trip reports will just say it will be alright. But if you happen to have a bad trip, which is more of a rule than an exception with this chemical, most people agree that it's the worst psychedelic experience they've ever had. In the last drug video, part 1, I said that 5-MeO-DMT was basically DMT's mysterious grandfather. And that's true. But what I didn't tell you is that 5-MeO-DMT was just scratching the surface of DMT analogs. And this form of DMT, DPT, is more akin to the ghost that haunts DMT's mysterious grandfather. This is the next level down the DMT iceberg that not everyone knows about. Now, let's make one thing clear. DPT is not natural. It has never been found in any toad venom, any tree bark, or anywhere in the known universe thus far. And in my opinion, God was probably facepalming hard when he saw humans first make this stuff. That's probably because if you take a high enough dose, your trip can last up to 12 hours. You see, when you make a psychedelic drug in a lab and it's nowhere to be found in nature, all of those hippie arguments of, it's just a plant, bro, made by the guy who looks like Shaggy from Scooby-Doo wearing a weed-scented tie-dye carpet he bought at the Dollar General, just goes out the window. Another
He's hating. This nigga's hating. He's mad hating right now.
interesting fact,
Like big hating.
about this cursed drug is that an entire cult was created around it. I'm serious. If we're being honest, you know the drug is insane when people think this drug is God. And I'm not joking, that's literally what happened. This cult is called the Temple of the True Inner Light. And the actual temple is unsurprisingly based in New York City. And if you think this sounds like some type of crazy science fiction plot, you wouldn't be wrong. It's weird because everyone talks about Scientology in LA, but somehow an NYC cult temple that worships a synthesized research chemical variant of DMT that can't even be found in nature just slips under the radar. Anyways, on their website, which is kind of hard to find, they go into detail about what they actually believe. Quote, "It is our belief that the origin of religion and spiritual awakening is the ingestion of psychedelics. In other words, the original followers of every true religion, such as Buddhism, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, believe that psychedelics are the embodiment of God. This was an..."
Okay. Hear me out. Hear me out, right? If you... Our brain naturally develops a lot of these psychedelic fucking chemicals, right? And when you die, you quite literally go on a trip from the DMT that get released in your brain. So I can see it's perfectly reasonable for there to be a psychedelic religion.
and is the God of the ancient prophets and messengers. And this is the light spoken of in scriptures and sacred texts. What's even crazier is that they smoke DPT in oil form, and they even have their own religious text referring to their God as oil. For example, on their website, they have one of their own scriptures that says, quote, "I am writing to you about those who would deceive you, but the oil you received from him remains within you, and you really..."
But these guys are just fucking crazy. Let's be honest here. These guys are just fucking insane.
need no teaching from anyone. Simply remain in him. For this oil teaches you about everything, and is true, and is no lie. Remain in him, as his oil has taught you to do. Needless to say, I wonder if this cult would accept Joe Rogan into it. I know we've talked about Joe Rogan a lot, but here's Joe Rogan entering this cult for the first time.
Welcome, brother. We have
I
awaited.
don't think this guy likes Joe
Jamie,
Rogan.
pull up that video of that bear smoking DMT. Also, pull up a Trust Me Bro video, please.
And that's totally real and definitely happened. Another weird thing about the temple's website is that they just take passages from the Bible and then just kind of add stuff to it. For example, their website features, quote, 1 St. John's 2:26. But I don't really know what saint is supposed to mean in this instance. Also, what their website says is notably different from the original scripture. With the original scripture saying, "I am writing these things to you about those who are trying to lead you astray." And this website's version of the scripture is, quote, "Salvation does not come from the darkness. Alcohol, cocaine, morphine, dishonesty, violence. Our Eucharist is DPT, a very powerful angel of a host, closely related to psilocybin." In my opinion, the biggest problem with this cult's claims is that DPT doesn't even occur in nature, and it also fails to be molecularly similar to psilocybin like they claimed in that verse. Alright, enough about the cult, which to me is one of the most insane parts about this drug, but what is the drug itself actually like? Well, the general consensus on the internet is that this drug is just, for lack of better words, eerie. And it's also one of the first drugs I've ever found that even experienced psychedelic users have been wary of. So, in other words, using this drug would feel exactly like how you would expect using a cult drug to feel like, with many users reporting dark spiritual experiences being associated with this chemical. For example, one Reddit post I found on the substance goes into detail about why it was the worst trip they ever had. This Redditor started by saying, quote, "So the other day I broke out some DPT and took around 50 milligrams. I have plenty of psychedelic experience consisting of high doses of the following: DMT, LSD, mushroom."
I think when it comes to like, because that's the reason why cults and like religion isn't. I don't think religion's bad, in a sense, right? But I will say this: the more religious you get, the more you start getting radicalized. And I think being radical in religion is just as bad as not being, like, not thinking at all. Because, like, you don't even have to be religious. Like, I believe in most of that shit's valid, right? Even some science, Scientologists, right? I think some of those guys are valid. But at the same time, there's an extent. When you're getting to the point where you're, like, affecting it, if you let it affect how you live, like, in a positive aspect, that's when it becomes like
MDI,
super cult like. But carry on.
X, 4-HOMET, and some other things I'm sure I've forgotten. But even my worst trips don't even touch DPT. Nothing gets close to what I just experienced, and it was possibly the worst psychedelic experience I've ever had. He then goes on to say, quote, "This is the weirdest, eeriest, and strangest, most intense chemical I have ever ingested. At first, it felt pretty good, and the visuals were quite enjoyable. But about 15 minutes after dosing, something became very off. It felt as if something had entered my body and I was no longer in control whatsoever, but in a different way than DMT. I didn't even feel that intoxicated, which was the weird and scary part. I just felt a complete loss of control."
Ooh, we're gonna watch I think it's not sativa, salva. No, because like some of those trips that people get stuck in when they take salva is really crazy. Like you'll see people will start to feel like they're in different realms. It is really hilarious. I'm not like, my favorite one was the dude that thought he was a fucking ceiling lamp.
Then comes the craziest part, in my opinion. They go on to say, quote, "I had an extreme eerie feeling along with extreme disassociation and possibly even slight psychosis-like symptoms. This feels like a direct pathway to communications with evil spirits. Many people who follow the philosophy of naturalism believe that designer drugs are a connection to evil spirits because they aren't naturally occurring, and thus weren't meant for human consumption." I know this is a bit off topic, but I thought it was an interesting concept to keep in mind for this specifically. The Redditor goes on to say, quote, "The next night I also had extremely vivid, terrifying nightmares and sleep paralysis. During sleep paralysis, a tall, black entity had quite literally tormented me until I fell back into my dream, then continued to do so in my nightmare. I usually do not have experiences like this, and I also never have had sleep paralysis." And if you found that story creepy, the comments aren't any more comforting, with one user commenting, quote, "Some people are sensitive to spiritual attacks. In this materialistic, spiritually closed-minded civilization we live in, everything is just reduced to chemicals, states of mind, or psychologicalized, or written off in another way. The spiritual world is just non-existent under that frame." And finally, one last claim I found about DPT was the following, quote, "I've been taking DPT and it makes me feel possessed in a way, almost like I'm the creepy dude in Hereditary. That sort of thing, I suppose. Just like I'm channeling something very intense that transcends humanity. All of the drugs on this list are insane, and I don't think any more detail is required on why. And for all of the people who commented on the first video that they wanted to try them, don't. And if you want to try anything, remember to try today's sponsor. Link in the description. Those gummies are legal and actually pleasant.
I remember people were really fucking tweaking out about his video, because they're like, "Oh, people most definitely want to take it." spelled stories wrong, but I don't care. Oh, this dude.
Drugs are bad. Unless they're sold by pharmaceutical companies, then they're good for you, and you shouldn't question it. But not all drugs are the same. In elementary school, we had the DARE program, which was Dare to Say No to Drugs. But in it, they grouped all drugs together. Like, how are you gonna group black tar, heroin, and weed together? They're completely different. No one is hanging out with a group of friends on a Tuesday like, hey, you guys wanna do some heroin? No. If you're using needles, then your only friends are either homeless or imaginary. Now, personally, I'm not really a big drug user. Smoking and drinking, sure, but my biggest issue with all the drugs is you don't know where you're getting. Like, I can tell what weed looks like, but a random pill could be ecstasy or birth control. And I don't want to be having hot flashes at Coachella. So I've pretty much stuck with drugs you can buy over the counter. Now, one drug I've heard tons of stories about was salvia, with one friend telling me he tripped so hard that he thought the world turned into a petting zoo. Unrelated, he now has to stay 100 yards away from any school. So salvia seemed exciting, but I just assumed it was illegal. That was until one day I'm in a gas station and I see it being sold behind the counter. I'm like, sir, what is that? And he says, I'm like, sir, I'm sorry, I don't speak Indian. Could you please just hand that to me? And to my surprise, it was actually salvia. Now, for those who don't know, salvia is from a plant known as Salvia dorinium, and when ingested can induce hallucinations. You can buy the concentrate version, which ranges from 10x to 60x, and I didn't really have the desire to do it more than once, so I just bought the highest dosage. So on a beautiful summer day, I went to the park with 4 friends. We heard the proper way to ingest it was to inhale it and hold it in as long as you could. Was this accurate, or just some stoner describing how the lack of oxygen makes you trip harder? Either way, we all decided to give it a try. So I took a hit, held it in as long as I could, and when I exhaled, reality completely changed. The ground became wavy, like I was standing in an ocean. The trees were dancing back and forth, and all my friends kind of looked like genies. Realizing I'm tripping balls, I thought it'd be a great idea to ride some swings. So I bolted as fast as I could to the nearest playground. As I'm running, I hear one of my friends yell, "Stab him in the mouth, Barry!" Keep in mind, my name isn't Barry, and I'm not sure who he wanted me to stab. Anyway, I got to the swings and hung out there for a little bit until my high wore off. You see, the high you get is super short, literally only about 10 minutes. However, when you come down, there is a huge side effect in that it makes you literally retarded. Now, I know that may not be the politically correct term, but I'm not talking about the developmentally disabled. I'm saying it makes you f***ing stupid, i.e. retarded. Imagine your brain is like a battery, where typically you're between 85 and 100%. Well, when you come down after salvia, your brain's at 5%. Forming complete sentences is a struggle. You basically revert to being a newborn baby, and this takes hours to go away. Worst part is, you know how stupid you are. Like, normally I'm jealous of mentally challenged people. I feel like I'm one can of pain away from being like, yay, butterfly. But you're not blissfully stupid, you're like depressingly stupid. Eventually, many hours later, when our brains have mostly recovered, we all discuss what happened. And I thought my experience was weird, but my friends were weirder. My buddy Phil says he saw Mario shooting fireballs down his arm. My buddy Sean says he saw a giant bee in the sky that landed on him, and he kept freaking out he was gonna be stung. And my friend Katie says she saw Jesus in the clouds eating Hot Pockets. I'm like, damn it, I only got wavy genies, and Katie is over here saying Christ eat some snacks. So then I asked my buddy Phil, why did you call me Barry? He said, because I thought you were the Flash. Which I guess makes sense because I did kind of randomly run away as fast as I could. But then I was like, okay, but who did you want me to stab? He says, hello, Mario was tossing fireballs down my bicep. I wanted you to get rid of him. I'm like, holy tits, your brain, 10 seconds into a drug, went to pure violence. Remind me never to do drugs with you again. Anyway, was salvia worth doing? No. Sure, it was great getting a few funny stories from friends, but the feeling of idiocy afterwards was unbearable. Listen, I wasn't born looking like Ryan Reynolds after an oil spill. All I got going for me is my personality. So I'd rather not treat my brain like I took a car ride with Chris Brown.
You shouldn't be doing a fucking drug, bro.
Stop it! Stop it! You know what you want to do. Oh, you want to push that subscribe button. Oh, push the button.
What if there was a substance that you could take that would make you live an entire lifetime as an inanimate object without even 20 minutes passing by in the real world? Well, guess what? It exists, and it's called salvia. How's it going?
These are some of the more extreme versions, and I fucking love them.
Everybody, welcome back. My name is Chase. If you clicked on this video, you already know what we're talking about. I don't need to tell you. There's still no sponsor on this video, and there's a pretty high likelihood that this video gets demonetized. So the least you can do is like and comment if you enjoy, and I hope you do enjoy. Let's get into it, and thank you so much for watching. What is salvia, and how does it work? Salvia, or Salvia divinorum, is an extremely powerful hallucinogen, and the way that it affects the brain is very unique. The active compound in salvia is salvinorin A, Unlike other more typical psychedelics which bind to a whole lot of receptors in the brain, salvia really only binds to one. This is why the effects of salvia are so unique. It works in a completely different way than other psychedelics. There are 3 different subcategories of hallucinogens. There are psychedelics, dissociatives, and deliriants. Salvia is most commonly thrown into the dissociative category because of the extreme detachment from reality, but depending on where you look and who you ask, it's also sometimes labeled as an atypical psychedelic. Regardless of which category you want to put it under, the effects that it produces are one of a kind. The trip reports at the end are of course going to be some really bad trips, but not every salvia trip is like that. Many people report having very eye-opening and positive experiences with this stuff. In no way am I advocating for it.
When it comes to psychedelics, the reason why you're having bad trips is because you're, in all honesty, is because you're already in a bad spot in your mind. Most trips on drugs is self-reflective. So if you're perspective, which is why I won't ever do certain drugs, because I know I'm that type of person. You know, I'm not the type of person to be able to like vibe with those things. Like for instance, if I was to ever take like shrooms, I would probably fucking bite someone's face off. And I'm not. And there's a higher chance for me to do that. So I'm just not gonna fucking risk it. If you want to, go ahead. You know, I'm not gonna tell you what to do. If you want to kill someone, I'm gonna look at you badly. But from your perspective, eat that face, man. Eat that face.
Or saying that you should try it, but I also don't want to unfairly demonize it. How was salvia used historically? Salvia divinorum is native to the Sierra Mazateca region in southern Mexico. It's named after the Mazatec people who are native to the area. The region is mountainous and forested, making it incredibly remote. Because of how remote the region is, salvia remained unknown to the rest of the world for centuries, only known and being used by the Mazatecs. The Mazatecs viewed salvia as a divine herb that could bring one into contact with the spirits. They would use salvia to treat a variety of illnesses and ailments, even something as minor as a headache. Because of their belief in the medicinal benefits and the knowledge that they can gain from the spirit realm, salvia is an incredibly important part to their culture. Often it is taken during healing ceremonies held by the Mazatec shaman at night. It's very important.
All throughout history, niggas just be getting high. Like, I'm not gonna lie. There's a reason why some of these, like, aliens and shit, like, throughout time, they be saying the most crazy shit, because these motherfuckers used to get high, bruh. Which is why it's kind of cool, because being high kind of shaped humanity in a way. Like, humans look for ways to get high. Most animals do. Look at cats.
Important for them to hold these ceremonies in a place that is quiet and dark because the effects of salvia are extremely subtle. So in order to receive the guidance that you are looking for during the experience, it's important to pay attention. Now, if you don't know much about salvia, but you've heard some of the trip reports posted online, me calling it subtle probably seems ridiculous. But the way the Mazatecs consume salvia is completely different from how it is used recreationally today. They ingested salvia in a process known as quitting, where you pick some of the fresh leaves off the plant, roll them up, put them in your cheek, and chew them. If you don't know how it's most commonly consumed today, we'll get to that very soon, but quitting gives a much slower onset and much milder effects. Salvia divinorum wasn't officially documented until 1939 by an American anthropologist named Jean Bissett Johnson. He observed the Mazatec shamans using salvia in their healing ceremonies and took note of its extremely unique effects. And it wasn't until nearly 50 years later in 1982 when salvinorin A was officially identified, the main psychoactive compound in salvia. In the 2000s and 2010s, salvia finally began getting more widespread attention throughout the US and the rest of the world. It being a legal hallucinogen made a lot of people curious to try it. Powerful salvia extracts began popping up in corner stores and smoke shops throughout the United States. And viral videos from the earlier days of YouTube, like driving on salvia and gardening on salvia by internet comment etiquette, gave salvia even more attention. Salvia remained legal because it worked completely differently from other known hallucinogens like LSD. It also had no potential for addiction and very low potential for abuse, so it seemed like the government didn't really care too much. That was until 2010, when Miley Cyrus took a fat rip of that stuff and it went viral. And while salvia is still federally legal, a lot of states cracked down on it soon after pretty heavily. Today, salvia is completely illegal in over half of the country, with 29 states banning it completely. Now, is Miley Cyrus really the only reason that salvia started getting banned? No. But I do think that if it wasn't for that video, it would have remained legal or decriminalized in more places, at least in the United States. Like I mentioned, salvia extract became very popular around this time.
Drop me a good stack out.
The extracts are made of dried leaf.
Drop me a fat stack out through that shit.
Extremely potent, with many of them ranging from 60 to 100 times strength. You're supposed to use these extracts very sparingly, only using a few leaves at a time. But because nobody ever wants to do research before they do something, people tend to just pack a bowl and light it up. And shockingly, they tend to have bad experiences. If you've ever used Zaw or hit the cart, think about your first couple of experiences. They probably weren't that enjoyable. The first time I ever hit a cart, it was not a fun experience. I was extremely paranoid and anxious, my heart was pounding out of my chest, I was sweating. Now imagine during your first Zaw experience, you emptied the entire gram cart by yourself as fast as you could, just chiefing on it. That's basically the equivalent of what people tend to do with salvia extracts. It's really no surprise why there are so many horror stories about this stuff. One of the most infamous examples of a salvia experience gone horribly wrong comes from Reddit. Around 3 years ago, a user made a post on r/salvia titled "My Salvia Experience Gone Wrong." They included pictures of the salvia extract they used, a 5th story window busted through, the landing spot, and various injuries.
Oh, damn.
In the comments, the user
That's your fault, though. I'm not gonna lie. If you're doing drugs and I'm not gonna lie, that's their fault, though. If you're doing drugs and you don't have no one doing drugs with you, then you don't need to be doing drugs. Drugs are something that you need to do in pairs.
elaborates,
especially
writing,
some of them,
unless
you're
to do psychedelics
just
for a couple of
comfortable
weeks
enough
after
to do them
a
by
recent
yourself.
mushroom experience I had
know
been
the side
best
effects, you
trip
know how you
of my
react
life.
on them.
I had heard about salvia and it being legal and decided it was the easiest thing to get. I purchased the strongest salvia I could find in my city and smoked about half a bowl of 100x. My friend tells me that I was making noises of pure fear and that I kept getting up and he kept redirecting me to the bed to lay down. He says when he was reading, I sprinted for the apartment door and dodged past him, saying I needed to get outside, and I pressed the elevator button. Apparently the elevator was too slow, and I looked around and sprinted at the window and cannonballed through it, popping the frame out of the wall, landing on my feet. My friend said he heard the thud when I hit the ground. My friend sprinted down the stairs, calling paramedics on the way down, and as I was on the ground and I asked if I should try to get up, and the small crowd that gathered all told me no, I was able to tell the paramedic what I had smoked. As far as for what I remember feeling weird and wavy and laying down. The only things I remember from that point on are a feeling of panic and seeing my friend's face appear to look like melting tar. My vision was black.
His friend's kind of a dickhead too. I'm not gonna lie. He went to go do
two of my dead cousins sitting on chairs.
There's a
in the
reason
middle
why
of a
if you have a
clearing
trip
in
sitter,
the
they need
forest
to be
with
a
a chair
trip
next to
sitter.
them. When I asked them who it was for, they simply told me that it wasn't for me. I have gone through over 11 surgeries since then and can no longer feel or move my feet. I cannot currently walk, but am in physical therapy to try to regain the skill. I am in constant aching pain. Unfortunately, the user would never regain their ability to walk, and it really just goes to show that making one dumb mistake can permanently alter the course of your life. Trip reports. I watched myself grow into a tree for 20 years. So, my friend and I decided to give salvia a try. During my trip, I clearly remember a sudden change in my friend's room. In the blink of an eye, it transformed into a calm, nature-filled scene. It was incredibly peaceful. That's when I realized that I wasn't myself anymore. I had turned into a young tree, and I have to admit, I looked pretty cute as a sapling. But the idea that I was stuck as a sapling forever hit me hard. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I could only watch myself as a sapling. Right then and there, I found myself compelled to observe my own growth into an adult tree. It felt like an incredibly long time. No, it was a long time. It seemed like 20 years. I was powerless, unable to communicate or take any action. All I could do was look around at the ever-changing colors of the trees nearby. After 2 decades, I slowly started to hear a familiar voice. I shouted, and my friend told me to shut the fuck up, although I couldn't see him. He eventually tapped me, and in an instant, my whole world snapped back into place. My friend was there, engrossed in watching Markiplier, which was the voice I was also hearing. I asked him what happened, and he casually said that I had been lying on his bed for about 5 minutes making moaning noises. I thought he was joking, but he swore it was true. I recounted my surreal experience to him, but he just laughed, apparently not quite buying my story. I don't care if nobody believes me, but bet your ass I'm not trying that shit again. I feel so sorry for trees now. Has anyone else had this happen to them, where time seems so much slower? Salvia Trip Report. Lived 15 years as a ceiling fan.
This one right fucking here is fucking insane.
First and only trip I'll ever have. I took a hit of salvia laying alone in my bed. The trip lasted for 27 minutes, but felt like 15 actual years. I experienced every second of every minute of every hour, of every day, of every month, of every year without a pause. Every night, I couldn't sleep because I was an object, so I would just wait at night for them to awaken. I still remember this trip like it was yesterday, every single part of it. The first year, there was a semi-fat man who was bald on top and had gray hair around the side of his head like a horseshoe. He had a wife with blonde hair who was pregnant and would routinely walk around the house naked. They would watch TV together every night and often get intimate on the couch during their show. The first 3 years of the new year, they are gone because the woman is in the hospital giving birth. Mind you, I was left here alone for 3 days waiting for them to come back. This wouldn't happen often though, since throughout my lifetime, they never went on vacation because they didn't have much money to spend, and they always complained about bills and money as well. They came back with a baby boy. The entire lifetime, I couldn't register what any of their names were, but I often heard most of their conversations. It was just hard for me to register because I was a ceiling fan. One day, he got changed directly underneath me on the couch, and when I looked down, it was just blank because I had no idea what it would be like to change a baby. Throughout the years, I watched the son grow up. I realized he was autistic and had a speech impediment, often mouthing sentences and only saying the last word verbally. However, he did become quite handsome with blonde curly hair.
Could be me.
I watched the dad, now completely bald, get fatter and fatter. I watched the mom let herself go. I observed countless nights of them inviting their church friends over and talking about pointless subjects while drinking wine. Mostly, I couldn't even understand. The last year, things started acting out of normal and it was terrifying. The boy's grandma, woman's mom, died. And even though she never visited and was never even spoken about, the mom sat the autistic son down to explain to him how death works and why they won't see grandma again. As she was explaining, her voice echoed through the room and her words turned demonic, and repeatedly kept saying stuff like, "Grandma's never coming back. You will never see grandma again. She's gone." And then quickly everything changed back to normal and she walked down the hallway like nothing happened. Also, I never knew what was down that hallway because I was perpetually stuck in that living room. Final weird event happened before my lifetime ended when the mom put 3 oranges on the ground then walked away. Then when she completely left, the oranges began spinning around in a circle. Then when she would come back, the oranges would suddenly stop spinning and she would put them back in the kitchen. Then finally, the dad went to go.
That's how you know. You heard that? You heard that, guys? The oranges spinning. The guy who made Toy Story, definitely doing mad drugs. Definitely. Like, there's no way he wasn't.
Turned me on for the first time in my life, and I started spinning slowly.
50
After the
years
5th
and no one
rotation,
knew
I
the
started
fucking
going
fan.
into third person out of the house in a bird's eye view. A second later, in a sudden flash, I was laying back down on my bed.
He must have been a
It took
shit
a
ass
solid
fan.
5 minutes to realize where I was and who I was. If I told you guys everything that happened in this trip, it would be much longer than the dictionary. Please ask questions or remember everything. I was just trying to say the important stuff without making it too confusing. Moral of the story, don't do salvia. Pure, desolate terror. Firstly, I should say that I'm not new to drugs, though I'm hardly a veteran either. I acquired a 10-gram bag of ordinary leaf through the internet. A friend who studies various forms of shamanism had talked about it. I have been meditating deeply recently and have felt all of my previous trips to be spiritual experiences rather than just for fun. I'm also a fairly cautious and responsible, or so I thought, adult. In other words, I thought I could handle it. I was wrong. My first few experiences were very mild. I experienced a tugging sensation down and leftwards. The third time, I had a vague sensation of being at the bottom of a flight of stairs, encouraging someone at the top to join me. The person at the top of the stairs turned out to also be me. All of these attempts required a great deal of smoking, enough to make me choke. It should be noted that I am not a smoker. I gave up for a week or two before borrowing a bong from my friend. Once I had this, I removed all obstacles in my room, meditated to focus my thoughts, and packed a large bowl. I took one lungful with the lighter held over the bowl the entire time. I held it in and barely managed to drop the lighter before all hell broke loose. I was aware of falling in through my own mouth
After this,
and down a tunnel fast.
I might
was
even
aware that the
go
tunnel
listen
was
to him
bottomless.
and see what I can
Looking up,
fucking-
the walls of the tunnel were made up of my own face,
Might write a
repeated
video
infinite
thesis on
times,
it.
each contained within the other. Kind of like when you have two mirrors facing each other. Suddenly, I became aware of the rest of the room as well. It was almost dark. The room was above the tunnel. The room was an isolated box. Outside the box, there was nothing. Nothing at all. I was struck by the most visceral panic I have ever experienced. It was even worse, and I'm really ashamed of this, than when I was fighting and failing to save my late wife's life after a fatal
Yeah, that's
accident
exactly what I'm
several
gonna do.
years
So,
ago. The sheer desolation was crushing,
the next
paralyzing.
week, I'm gonna do
I'm
a
afraid
no.
I just can't express
No.
it properly in words.
The
My room
next
was a box that
10
contained
days,
all that was left
I'm
of the
gonna-
universe, and
Each
I was
night, I'm
rapidly
gonna
falling
write
away
a
from it.
day report on my
Worse,
thing.
by now
on
something
lucid
was
dreaming.
sucking me away
and
from
I'll
it.
what's it called?
Worse
Try to
still,
stream once
the
a day
lip of the tunnel,
to give you
the
updates
uppermost of my
on
faces, was
how each
collapsing,
night has gone.
sucking my room, which was the universe, in behind me. I was aware that if I allowed this to happen, I would be responsible for the end of everything. All because I thought I was some sort of fucking spiritual voyager. I really can't express how terrifying this felt. I finally found the strength to fight against it. At first, I merely struggled helplessly, but I soon realized the only escape was back up through the tunnel. I climbed up and up. I could feel my poor grip against the walls of my throat as I climbed. Finally, I fought my way to my mouth. I should mention that my conscious body was the same size as the one I was climbing out of. I forced my hands through, pried the jaws open, and squeezed out. During this, the feel of my teeth and my breaking face were very real against my hands and body. This was only the first of literally thousands. On each exit, I was wheeled around to the left. On each exit, I grew more tired and more desperate. I felt I was losing the battle and the universe would be swallowed up by the imploding tunnel. I realized I wasn't quite climbing in the right way. I made one last, desperate effort. This time, my real body, outside of the trip, jumped off the bed and headed for the ceiling via some shelves. Now I was aware of the real world in the peripheral vision of my trip. I struggled out of my own mouth for the final time, but this time I ended up in an entirely different tube. I struggled through this tube, plunged into freezing cold water, and climbed into another tube. This tube led to the final exit. Again, one which I could vividly feel with my hands, and which I now know was the bowl of salvia. Suddenly, I was back in my real, singular body and aware. I ran and switched on the light. I took the tube of...
Like I said, that psychedelics are a big reflection on your own mind. So this man was probably, like, I'm not gonna lie, I hate psychoanalyzing people, but it's something I do naturally. This man's probably struggling with a lot of shit in his life at the current moment, and he just doesn't realize it. You like, if you're struggling emotionally, financially, or what's the other one? Financially, emotionally, or socially, which kind of falls in emotionally, but at the same time, if he's struggling with one of those three, chances are he's probably having, it could even be self-esteem issues, you know? Like, dream analyzing is big on, you have to do it yourself. You can't let, no one else can do it but you. So if you ever do have a bad trip, it's good to, like, what's it called? Look into your head and, like, think about where the fuck's going on, what is going on in my life, what do I need to correct, you know?
Of the bong out of my mouth and put it down in the farthest corner of the room. I went and sat on my bed, but still didn't feel free of it yet. I realized I was still holding my breath. It took a huge physical effort to exhale, and then all of my concentration to keep breathing. My body was convulsing and trying to tell me I was spinning around to the left. Gradually, I became present enough to look at the clock. I'd been gone for barely 2 minutes. The feeling of desolation didn't dissipate for another hour. I wanted to phone my girlfriend and have her come around, but at the same time, I realized I was safe now and it wasn't fair to scare her with this. Not ever. Oddly enough, several hours later, I was sound asleep and awoke the next day feeling fine. This is the polar opposite to any other substance I've tried. Everything else gave me a sense of connection with my surroundings. This sent me inwards. Everything else made me more positive about the universe. This made me question its very existence. I know this stuff sounds like a high school kid's horror essay, but that's what I experienced. The really odd things are these. My experience lasted for several hours, and yet in the real world, it only lasted for 2 minutes. It all felt 100% real. No trippy tracers, no blurriness, real as day. I'm sorry I can't write well enough to give a better sense of how terrifying this was. I won't be taking salvia again. Mostly, I think I'll stick to meditation, cups of tea, and a quiet life. If I've taken one positive thing from salvia, it's this. My life with my future wife, the family we want to start, all my beautiful friends, and the cool stuff I've yet to do, all of this is more important to me than catching a brief glimpse of nirvana through the use of mind-bending substances. If salvia gave a longer trip, I wouldn't have gotten out. Accidental salvia and walking the plank. This happened in summer of 2018. Decided to trip one night, dropped 2 tabs, had a pretty standard trip. Played Fortnite for the first time ever with my brother's friend on voice chat, pretty hilarious. Had some visions of Hindu gods and goddesses while
I'm not gonna lie, Fortnite has that fucking AI thing. It's pretty fucking funny.
Laying in the dark. Normal trip stuff, had a great time. Towards the end of the peak, I started to feel kind of nauseous, so I decided to hit the za. I know it's usually not the greatest idea on psychs, and I don't recommend it if you're not a fairly experienced tripper, but I'd done it before and it's always helped my nausea, so I load the bowl up and get to it. Immediately, I get this rush of anxiety that seems to have no reason behind it. I figure that it's just typical paranoia, so I keep on going.
Damn.
Towards the end of the bowl, I start to feel weird. Something's not right.
Man, fucking
I'm
dose
listening
this
to
song.
Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd, and the song currently playing, Brain Damage, starts to feel absolutely fucking sinister. I feel like it's directed towards me. Some of the lyrics, if you don't know the song, are, "The lunatic is in the hall, the lunatic is in my head. You lock the door and throw away the key. There's someone in my head, but it's not me." Keep those lyrics in mind and imagine that in the background of everything that follows. So I'm pretty freaked out, and I stupidly decide to finish the bowl, put everything away, and try to ride it out. I finally cash it, but then I start feeling the slightest twinges of that salvia book feeling. You probably know what I mean if you've ever done it. It's like your body is a book and someone is ruffling the pages down it eternally. Super weird and uncomfortable. The second I feel it, my mind flashes back and I realize my mistake. 2 or 3 days before, I had used some 200x salvia out of that same piece, and I guessed that I just didn't finish the whole bowl. The second I realized this, absolute panic sets in. I did not want to trip on salvia anytime soon, and I definitely didn't want to do it on 2 fucking tabs. But I somehow managed to rein myself in a bit, and I just start laying down. I look at my feet, and they're, how do I describe this? They're liquefying and floating upwards towards my ceiling. Time has slowed down immensely, and I can feel my memories and cognition slipping away as always happens on salvia. I look at my ceiling, and the geometry is just insane. Everything on my blank white ceiling is crystallized, complex, and I know it wants to hurt me. And then, like a train entering a tunnel, the salvia fully hits. I don't entirely know how to describe what happened. I didn't fully break through and lose all contact with reality. I had some small concept of where I was and that I should stay there, but that was about it. What I saw around me became nothing more than colors, shapes, and objects, with no reference. Mentally, and this is all especially metaphor, my consciousness became a blank time. My understanding of quantum mechanics is spotty, but the definition of a Planck time is the smallest unit of time possible with our current understanding of physics. For reference, that's 5.39 x 10 minus 44 seconds. I became a personified version of that. It felt like I was a grain of sand on the crest of a wave that was hitting a shore. Every time the wave hit the shore, it created the universe at that particular moment. Then it repeated the cycle over and over again. I became one of these grains, and it was horrifying. It was hell, hitting the shore over and over and over again, begging to be freed. I could tell that there were other things like me around me, but I couldn't perceive anything about them besides that they were trapped eternally the same way I was. Eventually, bits and pieces started returning. The place I'm in, it is called the bedroom. I am a human and live on Earth. Each piece that returned was joyous to me. I had gone through literal hell and come out on the other side clean. I wish, partially, that it hadn't happened, since it was so utterly horrifying, but at the same time, I'm glad I had this experience. It changed the way I looked at the world and how I looked at time. Hopefully you're doing well, my fellow Planck units. The rest of the trip wasn't the best. I was just trying to figure out what the hell my consciousness had been through, right? Until
you could track the practice mindfulness. Like, this one fucking YouTuber actually taught me about this, right? So, as you're walking throughout your day, I want you to try to notice every little tiny thing you're doing. Like, time is perspective. What may feel like 1 minute to you might feel like a whole hour to someone else. Time is so fucking perspective. And when you take certain drugs, like this man this man was going through the fucking ringer. Like, a second might have been a few days for this man. Some animals see it like that all the time. It's really cool.
Fell asleep.
Flies,
as far as after effects, I was a bit out of it for maybe 2 days after this happened, though it didn't interfere with any of my daily activities. Just made me feel a bit less social than usual. I had another trip a few weeks later on one tab, and it was good. At one point, I saw some geometry on my backpack and had a bit of a disgusted feeling because it somehow reminded me of the salvia experience, but besides that, it was alright. I was lucky that I didn't freak out. If you smoke salvia, clean out your pipe after you're done so you don't accidentally blast off like I did. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this stuff as interesting as I do and that you enjoyed the video. If you did enjoy, please don't forget to like.
One more video I want to find. It's one of my favorite. Oh, this is the animated version. One of my favorite stories because it's really possible.
My last semester at a certain college, I was assaulted by a football player for walking where he was trying to drive. Note that he weighed 325 pounds. I was only 120. Whilst unconscious on the ground, I lived a different life. I met a wonderful young lady. She made my heart skip and my face red. I pursued her for months and dispatched a few jerk boyfriends before I finally won her over. After 2 years, we got married, and almost immediately, we birthed our first daughter. I had a great job, and my wife didn't have to work outside of the house. When my daughter was 2, my wife and I birthed our second child, a beautiful baby boy. My son was the joy of my life. I would walk into his room every morning before I left for work and doted on him and my daughter. One day, while sitting on the couch, I noticed that the perspective of the lamp was odd, like inverted. It was still in 3D, but just wrong. It was a square lamp base, red with gold trim, on 4 legs and a white square shade. I was transfixed. I couldn't look away from it.
I like this one, but I don't.
I stayed up all night staring at it.
We might have to watch another
The
one
next
later.
morning I didn't go to work. Something was just not right about that lamp. I stopped eating. I left the couch only to use the bathroom at first. Soon I stopped that too, as I was not eating or drinking. I stared at the fucking lamp for 3 days before my wife got really worried. She had someone come and try to talk to me. By this time, my awareness of my surroundings was breaking up, and my wife was freaking out. She took the kids to her mother's house just before I had my epiphany. The lamp is not real. This house is not real. My wife, my kids, none of it is real. The last 10 years of my life are not fucking real.
Fucking imagine
The
that
lamp
shit.
started to grow wider and deeper. It was still inverted dimensions. It took up my entire perspective, and all I could see was red. I heard voices, screams, all kinds of weird noises, and I became aware of pain. A fucking shit ton of pain. The first words I said were, "I'm missing teeth," and opened my eyes. I was laying on my back on the sidewalk, surrounded by people that I didn't know. Lots were freaking out, and I was just completely confused. At some point, a cop scooped me up, dragged me across the sidewalk and grass, and threw me face down into the back of a cop car. I was still confused. I was taken to the hospital by the cop. Seems he didn't want to wait for the ambulance to arrive and give CT scans and other checks. I went through about 3 years of horrid depression. I was grieving the loss of my wife and children and dealing with the knowledge that they never existed. I was scared that I was going insane, as I would cry myself to sleep, hoping I would see her in my dreams. I never have, but sometimes I see my son. Usually just a glimpse out of my peripheral vision. He is perpetually 5 years old, and I can never hear what he says.
Like, imagine your own brain gives you fucking PTSD. Like, that would be some fucking shit. Like, I wouldn't even be able to deal with that shit. Like, I would cry. I would be depressed. Like, you start a whole fucking family just for it to be taken away by your own brain. Like, insane. I would show it, you know. Imagine how schizophrenics feel once they take their medicine. That's kind of insensitive. Most schizophrenic people don't have good visions. But you know what I mean.